Hello, and welcome to the Attractive Christians podcast, where we make Christianity a little less repulsive and a little more attractive and beautiful. I'm Annie, one of the producers. As promised, we're back with some new content, and in this episode, Ethan tackles a common argument people use to discredit Christianity, and he breaks down the counter argument and explains why understanding church history matters for us today. As per usual, make sure you like, rate, and subscribe, follow us on all the socials, and you can always connect with us by sending us a DM, or you can Gmail us at attractivechristians@gmail.com.
I don't miss you anymore.
Hello, Attractives. How are you guys doing? It's good to be back with you models. This mic is a little hot. Is it? Or am I just close to it? I don't know. It's a little hot. Turn that down just a hair. Okay. So I am back in the United States of America, much to my chagrin and disappointment. I'm back. And that means that the travels are over, but that we get another Attractive Christians podcast. So before we dive in, shout out, as always, to Mark and Annie, our attractive producers and editor and publisher. Annie edits and Mark publishes, and they are both collectively the producers of the show, and they're awesome, and they're so attractive. So a big shout out to them. So yeah, the past 2 weeks, as I think you know, if you heard the last couple episodes, I actually didn't listen to them, so I don't know what Annie's intro said. I'm assuming she said that I was in Europe, but I was. And that's why we didn't have new podcasts. We had old podcasts for 2 weeks, but I'm super happy to be back with you guys. So what I was doing in Europe, this is wild. I just want to tell you these stories. 3 stories from the trip. So I was in London. Okay, 4 stories from the trip. I was in London just for a day, and I did a Crumhill meetup where a bunch of Crumhill fans came to hang out with me at a bar. And it was smaller than I expected. A smaller turnout, I mean. But we had a good time hanging out. So that was cool. So just shout out to anyone at the Crumhill meetup if you're listening to this. Crumhill surprisingly got 11,000 new followers while I was on vacation, not looking at it. So that was cool. I assumed it would just kind of plateau without me constantly being on it, but no. Alas, it grew without me. That was cool. So then we go to Greece, and the bulk of the trip was in Greece, and we were on 2 boats. So we had a catamaran, which is one of those 2-hulled boats, you know, with the netting in the front. You might see pictures of people on that online or something. And then the other one was a monohull, so a more traditional looking sailboat. And so there were 8 people on each boat, 16 of us total. And we were just hopping around the islands of Greece for a week. And so this is the way that it went. Day 1, we leave the marina, both boats, right? So we're pulling out of the marina, and the other boat, the monohull, they were like, our engine's making a really funny noise. It doesn't sound good. And the captain who was with us was like, oh, he's British. He's like, oh, I think it's fine. Let's keep going. And so we keep going. And throughout the day, it just gets worse and worse, right? Like the engine is like bumping up and down, rattling around, and gets worse and worse. And to the point that they're like, we shouldn't drive this thing. But by this time, we had gone 3 hours like cruising across the sea away from the marina. So we're super far from the marina, and they keep saying our boat's making really bad noises. So Dave and I, or first Dave, goes to look under the boat to look at their propeller and engine and stuff. So he goes under and he goes, guys, one of the blades of the propeller is gone. And they're like, what? So I jump in with my GoPro to film it and see what's going on. And I come back up and I'm like, yeah, guys, one of the blades of the propeller is definitely gone. Because, you know, you can clearly see the propeller, which is supposed to have 3 blades like a fan. and it's missing one, and there's only two. And we're like, no wonder it sounds so terrible. So long story short, the next day they get towed. They get towed up by another boat back to the marina. They get it fixed. They meet back up with us. So we kind of have a day apart. And they meet up with us and we post up in this new bay, and we're posted up and we're chilling for a couple hours, swimming around, whatever. And then we go to leave and our anchor lines had crossed because there was a current and wind, and, so somehow the anchors had gotten twisted around and we couldn't get apart from each other. So once again, I jump in the water to see like which way the anchors are twisted, who's on top. And I have this really terrifying picture of I took it with the GoPro of the anchors crossed, but then they both just go down forever into the blueness. Cause it was 34 meters. So about 100 feet deep right there. And the water's perfectly blue clear, but you still can't see the bottom. And so you just see the anchor lines go down into this perfect blue abyss. It was so creepy. So I was like, okay, this boat's anchor line is on top. They have to go this way, blah, blah, blah. And then we realized we just couldn't do it because the wind was pushing us the wrong way. And so then I had the idea, why don't we tie a rope to one of the chains below the cross and release the chain, and then that'll untangle it. So we decided to do that. It works. They get untangled. The other boat sails away. But then we find out that our anchor is stuck to the bottom of the sea floor. And so we end up spending the night there because no matter which way our captain goes, we are stuck. Like the boat just will not move. And so that now we have a problem that we have to figure out. And then a diver ends up having to come down to us, and he dives down the next morning. So we have to spend the night in this weird little bay. It's not a hot spot or anything. It was actually kind of crappy and rocky. But the diver comes down to us. He dives down. Apparently, it takes him like 2 minutes. He goes down, just moves the chain out from under a rock, comes back up, and it's fine. And it's good to go. And so that's all it took to get us unstuck. And we pulled the chain up, and then we were good to go. So it was just kind of one mishap after another. But now they're fun stories. They're just lifelong things that'll always be with us, when we look back at that trip. Because if everything went perfectly and you're just like, we went from island to island, it was good, But yeah, there was a ton of other stuff that happened. And so we're in Greece and we're hopping around. And then after we go to Greece and then we go over to Athens, which is in Greece, and then we fly to Istanbul the next day. And Dave, it's just Dave and I at this point. The 16 of us dispersed. Dave and I go to Istanbul together. And Dave convinces me to get a Turkish bath with him. And I didn't know what a Turkish bath was, but he's like, apparently they just scrub you really hard and you feel really clean afterward. And I was like, oh, I feel pretty clean already when I just shower normally, but we'll do it because it sounds like an experience. And so we go in, we haggle with the guy, we get our price, and we go in. And so it goes like steam room for a while, then sauna for a while, and then the Turkish bath part. And so they bring Dave and I into this one room together, and there's a big stone table in this room. And we lie down on the table, and these two big Ugandan women come in, and they just kind of start throwing water on us with a bowl, right? They just kind of splash this water on us, and we're just lying there, and it's, it's nice. And we're only wearing like these tiny little boxer things they gave us. And so anyway, they splash water on us, and then they start scrubbing us, right? Like they put this glove on, and this glove is like really rough and exfoliating and whatever. And so they just scrub us really hard. And it kind of feels good, like the way exfoliating feels good, like it's really getting in there. And I'm just lying there getting scrubbed. and my eyes are closed. And I hear Dave getting scrubbed, except every like 10 seconds, I hear like scrub, 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 slap. And then scrub, 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 slap. And I was like, what? And I look over, and for some reason, Dave's Ugandan woman is just scrubbing him. And every time she finishes a section of him, like his calf, she just spanks him. And then she does like his thigh and then spanks him. And I was like, what the heck? And I was just like laughing on the table. And then afterward, I was like, Dave, why was she spanking you? And he was like, I don't know. And I was like, bro, did you pay extra for that or something? And he's like, no, I have no idea why she was spanking me. It was such a Dave thing, but he just got spanked by his Turkish masseuse. And I didn't. I just got scrubbed. But it was so funny. Only Dave, you know? So anyway, those were some of the highlights of the trip. There was so much other stuff. I don't know if you've been following along on my Instagram, but I've been posting a lot about it. So it was great. It was super great. Did not want to come back to the States. Highly recommend sailing around Europe, or Greece even specifically. The food is so good. All that stuff. Do it if you can, if you're able to. Yeah, let me think. What else? So that was just the doors open section. I feel like I have a million recs. I haven't talked to you guys in forever. I'm all excited and worked up now. But let's do some recs.
Recs.
Okay, so obviously when I'm traveling on long flights like this, there's a lot of movies. You know, they give you the option for all those movies and the seat back in front of you. If you haven't been on a plane in a while or an international flight, it's like friggin' Netflix. You have like the access to so many new movies and so many good ones. So I always knock out a bunch of new movies when I'm on a plane, and it's great. Some of them were not good, but one was pretty good. And one I watched a long time ago on a plane, and it always has stuck with me, and I don't know if I gave it as a rec before. So I'll do that one first. It's a movie called Past Lives. Oh man, just thinking about it gets me all emotional, all worked up. It's about this Korean girl who moves to New York City and follows her from childhood through, I don't know, 30s, something like that. Oh man, I don't even know how to describe it. Basically, so it's a lot of Hollywood movies like to tell you a simple story with a simple conflict, and this happens, and this bad thing happens, and then it gets resolved, and it's all neat and tidy, and it's worked out by the end. But Past Lives is so much more complex and rich without losing the entertainment and keeping you watching value as well. Because a lot of artsy movies are just boring and dry. And, you know, I don't like those. I want a movie to actually keep my attention and be original and good and complex and rich and all that stuff. So Past Lives is this Korean woman, and she had this friend who's a boy back when they were children in Korea, right? And then she loses contact with him because her family moves to the U.S. when she's I think, teenager. And so she grows up in New York City. She, you know, goes to college there. She is an American, you know, becomes a Korean American person. Like culturally, she's Korean American. And then she gets married to this white guy she meets in college, and you know, they have a good marriage and whatever. But then in her 30s, she reconnects with the Korean boy from her childhood. And he eventually comes to visit her in New York City. And of course, you can imagine, like, man, what kind of feeling does that stir up? Because she loves her husband. She's happy with him. He's a good guy. But she also has this connection to this boy who's Korean, who knew her when she was a young girl in Korea, in her home native culture, right? And they have all these things that they connect over and bond over. And so she, like, it's not like she, like, has an affair with him now, but it's more like this maybe you could say it's an emotionally fair affair because she's kind of going back to all these old feelings that she had of being a girl that her white husband can't relate to as well. And, or I mean, being a Korean girl, being a Korean child, and it's just so layered and complex, and you see these things unfold. Anyways, Past Lives, definitely worth watching. As soon as it ended, I was like, ugh, gut punch. Like, how do you resolve this? I won't spoil anything, but oh man, it just leaves you with all these like, man, this feels like real life because it's such a human, complex, real scenario. So, but the one I watched this time that was decent was Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret. And now you might be surprised to hear me say that because it's not a typical Ethan Reno rec, but yeah, it was decent. And I'll say it wrestles with some questions in a fun way. I don't think it's terribly deep in its answers, at least on the religious side. Because like the dad is Jewish, the mom is Christian, but they've both become atheists. And it's kind of like, oh, religions are just kind of whatever. But that stuff aside, I don't endorse it for religious, spiritual reasons. But I do endorse it just because of it was just a good coming of age story, a good puberty story. To be honest, there's a lot of puberty talk in it. Cause she's a young girl. She's, going through puberty, and it's just like, I'm sure that a girl watching it would connect to it even more than I did. Cause it's like getting her first period and waiting for her chest to grow and stuff like that. And they talked about that a lot. And just the, little middle school girl drama, being mean to each other, all that stuff. And Benny Safdie and Rachel McAdams were both in it as the parents, and they were fun. And yeah, there was just something about it that by the end of that movie, I was like, oh, this was just like good. This was a nice movie. Religious things aside, like it is interesting because based on the title of the movie, Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret. She like prays, but she doesn't know how or what she's praying to. But she feels this urge to pray to God, despite the fact that both her parents rebelled against their respective traditions and raised their daughter a-religious, right? And yet this girl has the impulse within her to pray to God and to, at various times throughout the movie. So it's interesting. I'll just say that. I don't necessarily endorse it for religious reasons. It's just a good all-around movie. But it does raise some interesting questions. Maybe one of them, though, is, do we need religious structures in order to connect with God? Or could we, like Margaret, simply just start talking to him? And I guess the answer is kind of both, right? I won't get into that too much right now, but if you watch it, let me know and we can discuss it some more. But yeah, so that's it for Rex. Let's do a brief meat section.
Meat.
Okay, so the meat. This is based on a conversation I had recently at work. So there's this book. Okay, so here's the backstory. So the other day, I was at work and got into this conversation with one of the residents there. He's an older man in his 80s, maybe 70s. I don't know. Somewhere around there. And he was telling me that he read this book called Heretic by Catherine Nixey, Nixey. And he said that because of this book, it convinced him that there really is there's no foundation to stand on when it comes to being a Christian. And here's why. So I'll just give you the premise of the book. So the book basically sets out to discredit Christianity by saying that in the early first couple centuries of Christianity, there were a myriad of what you could call Christianities, right? Or sects or different gospels, different narratives of Jesus's life, and so on, until Constantine in 325 AD at the Council of Nicaea just said, these are the books we're going to use, and just kind of empirically made Rome a Christian empire. And because of that, all the other books or all the other Christianities fell away. And we only believe in the one, despite the fact that for several hundred years, there were many people like Jesus. There could have been many versions or iterations of Jesus, many different gospels, right? All of these quasi-scholarly sounding people saying, yeah, but have you looked at the Gospel of Thomas, where Jesus kills another kid when he's 12 years old, stuff like that. And that's kind of the premise of the book, is look at all these different things going on. Look at how Jesus ripped off the Roman stories of Hercules and Apollonius, I think it was. Something like that, because they have similar, hero stories, something like that. Like Hercules goes to the underworld and then comes back. He's the son of Zeus, all this stuff. And so it kind of is just kind of meant to be I don't know what her intention was in writing the book, but it turns out to be one of these books that's like, oh, look, we can disprove Christianity because there's all these other things. This is what they all hide from you. You don't know the truth. You don't know the actual history. Kind of like the Da Vinci Code, except this one actually is not fictional. It's supposed to be nonfiction. It's supposed to be a scholarly book. And the thing is, so this guy at my work read this book and of course came away with those conclusions as well. As would most people who read this book and don't know the counter arguments. They don't have the scholarly depth or background to actually refute some of the straw men that Catherine Nixie uses. And I use that term intentionally, that she creates a lot of straw men, such as saying that, oh yeah, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, and John, they were just some of the gospels, just like the Gospel of Thomas, and just like other pseudepigraphal writings that existed in the first couple hundred years after Jesus, like they're all the same. And as a scholarly person, actually, you don't even have to be a scholarly person to just think this, but if you think about it, those are not equal. And you can just use a little bit of common sense to say, yeah, well, there must be a reason that the Gospel of Thomas, even before the Council of Nicaea in 325 AD, there must be a reason that these 4 stories about Jesus, the 4 Gospels we have, circulated so much more and so much more broadly than all the other Gospels, right? So in other words, her argument is that because there were a myriad of versions of these Gospels, that there can't be any right ones. or the fact that there's a diversity of them disproves the fact that any of them could be valid. Right? Does that make sense? But that argument doesn't really hold up if you think about it a little bit logically, right? Think about it in any other scenario. Like, I don't know, government. Like, there's several different ways to do government. You have monarchy, you have oligarchy, you have empires, which are run by just dictators. You have authoritarianism, you have communism, you have democracy. The fact that there are multiple doesn't mean that one is not better than the others, or that one is not more beneficial than the others. Or put it a different way, there's a whole ton of Star Wars fan fiction. There's countless Star Wars fan fiction being written out there, right? The fact that there's a diversity of Star Wars fan fiction doesn't mean that there is not still a true Star Wars canon, right? You don't suddenly say, oh my gosh, there's so many Star Warses now. I don't know which ones are true or which ones are like authentic and original. It's like, well, yeah, you do. You have the ones made by George Lucas, who created Star Wars, right? There are naturally going to be false versions of things. Last week when we were in Turkey, there's this marketplace where you can buy a watch that says Rolex on it. And it looks just like a Rolex. It's modeled after real Rolexes. It is clearly not, because it's like $80. Does the fact that that exists mean that there is suddenly no real Rolexes out there? No, it just means that people made counterfeits of it. So using that as an argument is not really a great argument. I read a review from the Christianity Today, their review of it, and they did a really good job of citing page numbers, using specific examples, saying, yeah, she used this verse this way, and it's really not saying that at all. And here's why. And they, even scholarly, the fact that she used just, without paying attention to any of the details, she just kind of equilaterally compared Matthew to the Gospel of Thomas, right? One has been accepted by Christians for millennia for very good reason, and the other has been rejected by Christians for millennia for very good reason. And she didn't really say why. It's basically just saying, look at all these different versions of Jesus there are. And it's like, well, yes and no. Mainly no. Because, again, the fact that there exists so many numerous outliers claiming to be truth doesn't mean that the true ones are now false. Does that make sense? So you may have heard that argument, and I wanted to dive a little bit just to give you a little bit of illumination on this subject, so that if you hear an argument like this, just know that there's really good scholarship that pushes back against it pretty strongly, and that her scholarship was pretty weak in the way that she researched things. So in the early church, in the first couple hundred years, you see a diverse explosion of opinions and thoughts about what just happened in what we call the Christ event, right? The life, birth, death, resurrection of Jesus, the Christ event. It shakes up reality. Whether you believe it's true or not, that's fine. But it does change the course of history. Regardless of what you think about it, it does. Whether you're a Christian or not, everything in the Western culture is shaped by Christianity. So everything changes because of this Christ event. But of course, immediately, it's not like humans magically have all the answers. Like, oh, now we get the Trinity. Now we get that Jesus was fully man and fully God. Now, right? These things have to be sorted out over time. It's not like Jesus gave them a systematic theology and said, poof, here's everything you need to know, categorized, bullet pointed. Here's the outline of theology that you need to know. Like, no. The New Testament is mostly letters and stories. Those are not systematic theologies. They're very human texts. And so we have to study them and extrapolate, okay, what does this mean about the Holy Spirit here and the Father and the Son? And wait, are they all God? Wait, do they all interact? How do they interact? Right? So they figure these things out. And over the course of about 300 years, they're like, okay, well, they can't like, the Father couldn't create the Son and then later the Holy Spirit. They have to all be co-eternal, right? These are things that emerge over time as they use logic and scripture to kind of reason their way into it, so that by the time the Council of Nicaea happens in 325 AD, they're able to say, okay, we look at the Bible, we look at the New Testament, and these are the conclusions we've come to. And we want to rule out this heresy, so we will word it this way in the Creed, right? So really what the Creed is, the Nicene Creed, is a rebuttal of all the heresies that they are condemning, right? They're saying, well, we don't believe that Jesus was, partially God, partially man. So we're going to say that Jesus was born of the Virgin Mary, fully God, fully man, so that we can rule out these heresies. Because every single line of the Nicene Creed, you can look and say, okay, now I see that this is ruling out this heresy. So, for example, it says, I'm pulling this from my memory. When it's talking about Jesus, it says, Jesus, the Son of God, begotten, not made. right? So Jesus is positionally, he is begotten from the Father, but he is not made by the Father at a certain point in time. So that was one of the earliest heresies, was this dude named Arius. He tried to convince people that there was a time that God existed, but Jesus did not exist. So he got people to chant, there was when he was not. There was when he was not. Meaning, like, there was a time before Jesus existed, that God the Father created Jesus, right? So the Nicene Creed says that no, that can't be right. They must eternally have relationship for eternity past. So that's why in the Creed it says begotten, not made, of one being with the Father, right? So they're ruling out these heresies. But that doesn't happen overnight. That happens after decades and then centuries of studying the Bible, reasoning together, worshiping in church, and creating a cohesive canon of books. And part of the reason that we have the canon that we do, and we can see this emerge earlier in like Irenaeus, Clement of Alexandria, Gregory of Nazianzus, guys like that, they list off a lot of the books that they think should be in the canon. And surprise, surprise, it's all the books that we have in our canon today. Most of them are listed by these people. And then Augustine, later in the 4th century, also gives a coherent list of the New Testament canon. So it wasn't Constantine. This argument that Constantine is like, here's the canon we're going to use, and it's going to control Rome. It's bogus for so many reasons. One, people way before Constantine said stuff like that. Irenaeus, the guys I just listed, Irenaeus, Origen lists off books of the Bible he likes, right? So there was kind of a consensus before the Council of Nicaea on which books should be in the Bible. And then it's also bogus because the New Testament, as it is now, is not pro-Rome at all, right? At best, Jesus is ambivalent about Rome. He says, like, give to Caesar what is Caesar's, but give to God what is God's. And he's like, yeah, pay your taxes, but don't give them more than that, It's not necessarily pro-Rome. And then it presents the Romans as killing Jesus. So if you're going to make a pro-Rome canon of books, you wouldn't make them kill the good guy. You know what I mean? Like, do you not see the logic there? So I don't know what, I confess, I did not read the book, Heretic, but I'm just familiar with these arguments because I see them online a lot, and they're not strong. It's nothing that Christians haven't already addressed many, many times. But if you're not familiar with this background, then it could sound really convincing and compelling. Like, oh, I didn't know that there were all these other Christian sources in early Christian writings and blah, 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 right? So what I'm saying is don't be swayed by stuff like this. You'll read this kind of stuff and it might sound like, ooh, this is exciting. Wow, I didn't know this about the Bible. Ooh, this is scandalous. Kind of the same way the Da Vinci Code felt. But really what it is just not great scholarship. If you want to read the Christianity Today article on it, you can just Google Christianity Today Heretic Review or something like that. Because he did a really good job of being like, here are the specific weak points in the scholarship here. Here's where she missed entirely and went off course and blah, blah, blah. So check that out if you want a more in-depth analysis and you want to learn a little bit more about early Christian history. So, yeah, hopefully that's helpful. Maybe you've encountered similar types of arguments in the past, maybe not. But yeah, I hope this is helpful for you no matter where you're at. So this is a long episode. Let me see. How long are we at right now? 37 minutes. That's a long time to just talk. But we're doing it. So thank you guys so much for listening. You're so attractive. Stay classy, models. If you want to write into the show and give me topic ideas or ask questions, it's attractivechristians@gmail.com. I would love to hear from you. We always need more prompts and inspiration and stuff like that. So please write in. I would love the interaction. I think that's it. Follow Crumb Hill, follow the Instagram, follow YouTube, whatever, however you listen, and recommend it to your friends, this podcast, share it around. And I love you guys. Talk to you later. Stay attractive. Bye.